Look, the reality is, as we discussed on yesterday's Good Morning Walk, was that at the moment, every single amount of pressure that can be used on Rishi Sunak to call a general election must be used. That includes accepting that defection. That puts a lot of pressure on Sunak because we no longer have the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Thank you very much, Boris Johnson. That was now taken out, and the only person who can call a general election is Rishi Sunak. And if he does really intend to run out the clock and wait until next January to call a general election, then, oh boy, Rishi Sunak is really, as I've often described, really hiding under a desk and crossing his fingers, hoping that, something changes. But I've said, what honestly can change? You're going to end up with a zombie parliament doing nothing. And everyone can see the parliament is doing nothing. If the parliament is effectively doing nothing, might as well just, do it now. Just call it now. So the more defections that happen, the more pressure it puts on, the more it eats into their, majority. We got the other recent poll that was this week as well that showed, the Conservatives are going to only keep but 4 seats. Now, of course, very, very shocking, but it's not the first time we've had such a poll. Yeah, it is all about how much pressure we can put on. And just this week, we've now heard that there are now 200, and this is coming from the Conservatives, that CCHQ, that's the Conservative Party HQ, is marking over 200 different constituencies as vulnerable at the next election. And these are seats that have majorities in the region of 5,000, 10,000 to 15,000. That is a lot of seats. Now, imagine you are a Conservative MP. And, as we know, Rishi Sunak's meant to be following this 80-20 strategy. But imagine you are not, one of those MPs that is being covered by that 80-20 strategy. What reason do you have to stay loyal? We know many, many more and more Conservative MPs are considering just upping and quitting because, well, they'd rather, shall we say, get on the job market sooner rather than later. So the more and more stories you hear like this, the more we know that pressure is being put on Rishi Sunak. And of course, eventually, even himself, as I keep on describing it, this is a snowball being rolled down a mountain. You might try, stopping it at the top of the mountain when it's still a snowball, but eventually this is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger before it becomes an avalanche. And eventually, even Rishi Sunak will not be able to escape the reality that this is an avalanche crashing down on his head. Waiting forever is not going to be a viable strategy. So, as always, before we get more into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there's the Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as well, there's the Pony Club as well. All that does help support the channel. You can always click the like and share button as well. And as always, let's crack on into The Guardian with them covering this. Conservatives mark over 200 constituencies as vulnerable at the next general election. So the Conservative Party is now quietly pouring extra resources into dozens of Tory-held seats now deemed at risk at the next general elections, including one with a 17,000 majority. They know this is becoming an ever-increasing problem. They know that they are going to have to fight harder than they normally would have to. This is why you are now seeing all these extra resources being put into. I think, this 80-20 strategy, this might be the beginning of the end of the abandonment of this. I can definitely see that. So, as many as over 200 constituencies held by Conservative MPs have now been marked as vulnerable and worthy of extra support by Party HQ, including Weston-super-Mare in Somerset, a seaside town held since 2005 by the Conservative MP John Penrose, who was re-elected in 2019 with a majority of 17,121. This now demonstrates that the Conservative Party is now taking significantly more defensive approach to the election than it has admitted publicly, and the hereto now safe seats with sizable majorities are now deemed at risk. So, after all this time of denying the polls that, oh, that's just a one-off poll. Oh, but here's another one. That's just a one-off poll. But here's another one. That's just a one-off poll. Don't worry, we'll do something in the budget. That'll get us ahead in the polls again. Now it seems they're now taking notice. Probably because many of these Conservative MPs are like, hey, I'd actually like to continue being an MP, but you need to defend my seat. Otherwise, I'm going to cause a problem. And here's the thing, if they've got to now defend more seats, that's now more money they have to now spread out amongst these constituencies, meaning that their electoral strategy is now turning one of from this 80-20 strategy to now being incredibly defensive as possible. So the Tories have now long officially pursued an 80-20 election strategy focused on defending 80 of the most marginal seats while aiming to win 20 target seats from the opposition. But the number of Tory constituencies now marked as vulnerable and given the extra support has risen from 80 to about 200 in recent months, according to a senior party source, means that the party is now expecting and extending its defensive strategy to seats with hefty majorities of 15,000 or more. The party did not deny the 200-seat figure, with a spokesperson saying, only the Conservatives have a plan to deliver for the country, and that's why we are supporting all our MPs and candidates across the country. Yeah, it's now finally sunk in that this 80-20 strategy of, oh, we're going to defend 80 seats while trying to take 20 seats from the opposition. Yeah, they've now realized that what a lot of people have been saying for a while of that is completely deluded, and Rishi Sunak saying you're going to be part of the biggest comeback in election history. Yeah, it's delusional. So a party official did stress that its 80-20 list had always been flexible. They said, as well as seats now getting more defensive resources, more seats had been added in Scotland, where the Conservative Party now believed it was in the strongest position to defeat the SNP party. It said it never been rigid and it doesn't tell you that the seats are the most important, another senior figure said. With additional resources now given constituencies singled out on the 80-20 strategy clearly included printed campaign material as well as digital support. In a briefing by the Conservative MPs last year, the US pollster Frank Luntz warned that those with a majority of less than 15,000 were now at risk of losing their seats, and about 180 Tory MPs have majorities well below that threshold. Cabinet ministers with majorities of 15,000 and less include the Justice Secretary Alex Chalks, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, the Commons leader Penny Mordaunt, and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. A Tory source familiar with internal party processes, said that while the 80-20 strategy was, quote, a useful fundraising tool, in reality, the party was likely to be pursuing a 100% defence strategy. Because you have to run, if you are Rishi Sunak, you have to have realized that your entire party and political strategy has to come down to that defense. If you do not go on the defense like 100%, it is going to be wipeout. And even then, the defense of these seats is going to be incredibly difficult because now it becomes, well, where where do you defend? If you've got to defend everywhere, you risk gaps, you risk losing seats, you risk focusing on seats where maybe you do actually win, and then that's a ton of resources wasted, where in fact you lose a couple of other seats because they didn't get the resources that were needed because they were sucked up by another seat. Expect, expect probably in the next couple of weeks, Tory MPs start to argue that resources for an upcoming general election campaign aren't being used properly, or that their seat isn't being given enough attention, while other seats are being given more attention. Already, this 80-20 strategy very, very clearly has been given a lot of cold shoulders and responses by a lot of Conservative MPs. Because remember, they're only going to defend under that 80-20 strategy 80 seats. So how do you feel then if you are a Conservative MP and your constituency isn't part of that 80? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Why on earth do you have to be loyal to Rishi Sunak? Why on earth do you have to be loyal? Even now with this, oh, we're going 100% defensive. Forget about taking seats. It's all about how many seats can we retain at the next election. Forget about trying to take any. It's all about how defensive we can be. I think that's going to be it. And then, of course, this will start internal fights saying, well, actually, my seat deserves more resources than him. And then that will start some very interesting fights. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Do leave a comment down below. Do remember to click the like and share button as well. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.